Success! Oh, hi. This time, you know, after the last one, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not going to be able to remember everything. I'm not going to forget to talk. See? I'm not going to remember to talk about everything. Things already came to mind after that last video that I left out. Like how I got my, can you see it? A scar on my head from when I was a little kid and we were living in California, and I was running around the coffee table with my friend, and my brother was like, hey, you guys shouldn't run around the coffee table, you could slip and hurt yourself. And we were like, whatever. And then my brother left with his friends, and then my friend had to go home, but I was having so much fun running around the coffee table with my socks on that I kept running around the coffee table, and then because my socks were on, I slipped and hit my head on the corner, and all this blood, and my brother was freaking out. My mom had to call my dad, and then the ambulance had to pick me up, and I just remembered I just wanted my Care Bear. I forgot to mention that. I forgot to mention that in 4th grade I went to this thing called High Trails, where it was awesome. It was like this camping, wilderness, old-timey place, and it was so much fun. And we met a Native American, and one of my friends kept on asking so many questions that the Native American was so impressed that he gave him a very special buffalo nickel, and it was like on my bucket list one day, I'm going to get a buffalo nickel, and then I actually found a buffalo nickel at work a few months ago. 2 of them. So, there's that. But High Trails was such an amazing experience with the bear and the embarrassing moment when these kids took a picture of me when I was changing pants and they saw that I had long johns on. We called them long johns. I guess now they're called thermals. And they were like, we're going to show this picture to everybody, but my mom made me wear those long johns and I was all embarrassed. And then this one older guy had a pocket watch that when you opened it up, it played that one song. You know what I'm talking about? No, wait, it's the other one. It's one of the famous songs. But I can't remember it now, so who cares? It doesn't matter. I'm not going to have all the details, and I'm not going to have every story. Big deal. So I guess my point being is I should just get to the cliff notes and tell as much as I can about who I was during that decade of my life. And if anyone wants further details or further questions, or anything explored more, or wants me to tell, I'm an open book. I'm an open book. And again, I forgot to go over at the beginning of this video how important it is to discuss. To mention that this is intended for, if something were to happen to me, God forbid, almost did last week, and any of my friends and family wanted to get to know me more, like my son grew up. Hi, son. Like, man, I don't really know much about my dad. This is just to make sure that a piece of my memories and life experiences live on after I'm gone before I forget them all for real. So this is not meant for you. You will have no interest in this. You will not enjoy this. And some of it might even disturb you. So I don't recommend watching this. Having said that, like for example, I think maybe my, I wouldn't say obsession. I don't have a foot fetish. That'd be like saying I have a woman fetish. No, I just like the attractive ones. I happen to find attractive feet attractive. Yes, when I look at a woman, first thing I go for is the face. If I'm attracted to her face, I'm good with the rest. Second thing I go for is the feet. If I like your feet, we're golden. And then my third favorite body parts, I guess I'm more of a boob guy than a butt guy. So, you know, face, feet, and boobs. Sue me. Although I recently have discovered, I mean, this wouldn't be related to my earlier part of my life. This is more of a recent discovery. I've recently discovered 2 things. Hands. Hands are very good. But before that, even more so, ears. It wasn't until it was brought to my attention that all of a sudden I started noticing everyone's ears, and ugly ears are really ugly, and attractive ears are very attractive. Go figure. Leave it to the comic Sex Criminals. Great comic. So stuff like that, but I think maybe my thing with feet may have started way back in the day when I vividly remember being a very young child and seeing my mother's feet. No offense to my blessed mother, but I remember looking at them and going, those are really gross. Those are really gross feet. And sometimes when you see something disgusting, it turns you on to the beautiful ones of that thing. Like, I remember seeing one so bad that I appreciate the good ones. I just remember early memories of that. And then Margot Kidder, is that her name? Margaret Kidder? The lady who played Lois Lane in the original Christopher Reeve Superman movies. When I was a kid, we had that first oh, maybe it was the second one. Either one, probably. But I think it was the first one, because when she goes down in the thing and the car is sinking, she tries to hit the brakes, and they have a close-up of her foot, and I remember pausing it to look at her foot. I mean, some would call it a fetish, but I don't. I don't, because I'm not... See, a foot fetish is those people who like all feet and want everything done with feet. Not me. I'm good with that. I just happen to enjoy and appreciate an attractive foot, and an ugly foot will definitely turn me off. See, a foot fetish is that people who love all kinds of feet. They go, ooh, look. Anyway, I'm not going to dwell on that, because who cares? I'm me, you're you. Let's not judge. For example, one time I found a cassette tape when I was very young of my father's. Big Tom Waits fan. I grew up on Tom Waits. He loves Tom Waits. We all love Tom Waits. But one of Tom Waits' album covers had a topless woman. Oh, my alarm's going off. One of the album covers had a topless woman in the background, and she had what are those things called? Like sashels, you know, she had little coverings on her nipples. But you could see her boobs, and it was like my first core memory of seeing boobs. I remember one time I wanted to see a naked lady so bad I conceived the idea of hiding in the cupboard while my mom was in the shower and then sneaking a peek. Well, I know that's a very disturbing thing to deal with it. I'm human, you're human, we're all human. We've all go through these things. We just don't admit it and talk about it. Well, I'm keeping these things on record, and I got nothing to be embarrassed about or ashamed of. I never did it, but it was a thought. But anyway, so I saw this lady's boobs on the Tom Waits cover, and I remember having the thought. It was more of an assumption, really. And I went, you know what? When I'm older, I'm going to find a woman with no nipples. I thought there was two different kinds of boobs when I was really little. I thought there were boobs with nipples and boobs without nipples. And my preference, I assumed, would be boobs without nipples. Which, ironically enough, because of my wife, I'm gonna go into some stuff. I told you, don't watch this. My ex-wife's areolas were braily. That's the best way I can describe them. Where you have the areolas that are bumpy. I wouldn't say they were larger, but they were bumpy. Which then, in the future, after her, I was attracted to similar things. Sometimes when you have a close experience with someone, and their body was a certain way, that's what subconsciously, psychologically, makes you then attracted to that particular type in the future. I do suspect that I'm obsessed with Chloe Sevigny because she's kind of like a perfect blend of my baby mama and my ex-wife, which is scary. Because my ex-wife is gorgeous, but I would never want to be in a relationship with her. And I'm not really attracted to my baby mama anymore, plus she's psychotic. But she does kind of look like Chloe, and I'm pretty bummed that she ended up being crazy and things didn't work out with us, because I could have had my own little Chloe. Anywho, that's neither here nor there. We're talking about my teenage decade, which would take hours anyway if I didn't just do Cliff Notes. I didn't even mention how I got my name, and that I was named after Paul McCartney on my mother's, according to my mother, and according to my father, I was named after the Bible. My father, who used to be a pastor, who's now an atheist. What does that tell you? My father was a pastor, and then worked for Focus on the Family for decades. And a few years ago, became an atheist, and is now very proud of it and won't shut up about it. Oh, when we were kids, we had like a friend of ours made a computer game that we loved playing, and it was called Life. And we'll never be able to find this computer game because I don't think it actually ever went into mass production. It was like something that they literally made, and we got to play. And there was a thing where you had to like cross the yard and not like old school computer game. I'm talking like Pong graphics. But it was pretty cool because it was way ahead of its time for back then. You would have to cross the yard and avoid the dog. You would have to drive in your car and avoid the lightning storm. And when you had to go through the lightning storm, there would just be these random deals. And if they hit your car, you'd be in trouble. Like there was a little fishing section where the pole went down on the thing and you had to try to get fish. It was just like this crazy, crazy game of just random mundane things you might do in life. And it was called Life, I think. I just wish I could get my hands on something like that again, but I'll never see that. So I want that on record because that was a thing that existed that I'll never, like, I barely still have memories of it. But it was cool. So moving on to my older years, okay. So 5th grade, plenty of crazy stuff. I remember my leg scar when a friend of mine and myself were playing out in like a wooded area, so like a creek. Not like the woods, but like a creek in between some neighborhoods. All of a sudden there was like people shooting at us. At least this is how I remember it, and this is what we believed at the time. I don't know if it's true, but I'm pretty sure it's half true. There were people shooting at us, so we ran away from them. They may have been shooting at us, and they may have been real guns, but in retrospect, I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't shooting at us. They were just shooting and thought it was funny that we were scared and ran away. And it was probably not real guns, but like BB guns. But the point being, at the time, in our minds, these people were shooting at us. So we ran away, and as I was running full speed, and I'm a fast runner, I didn't see this barbed wire. And I ran into this barbed wire that was thigh level. So as I ran into this barbed wire full speed, thigh level, like, I flipped over. So it caught my thigh, bam! I do a somersault over the barbed wire. And of course the barbed wire, and it was like an old rusty one. Barbed wire went in my leg. I have this perfectly triangular scar. You know what a triangle looks like. A triangular scar in my leg to this day from that incident. We went back to the friend's house. His mother was very kind. Did her best to disinfect it, Neosporin, and took good care of it. I probably should have gotten like stitches or something, because it was like, I remember seeing like a chunk of meat out of my leg, and it was ugh. But that was the thing that happened. So elementary school was an interesting experience, as you may or may not know if you watched the first video from this series, but I certainly hope you didn't, because I wouldn't recommend it. Things get pretty serious. I'm gonna be real. Middle school, I went to Challenger Middle School, which my son is not going. My elementary school is High Plains Elementary, which is where my son is currently going, and he's about to be done. And it's pretty awesome revisiting that place and having my son go to the same elementary school that I went to, and it's 25, almost 30 years later. I guess 25, I'm not that old. But yeah, I would have been, so yeah, we'd say 30. Oh, right, because I am about to be 40. So 30 years ago, I was going to this school, and now here he is about to graduate from it. But I went to Challenger Middle School. He's not going to go there, which is a bummer. I would like to revisit that building. I haven't been back there in almost 30 years. Great experiences. I could go this and that. I remember in middle school is when I got my first bad grade in science, and the teachers were like, oh no, we need to have a big meeting with his parents. And then I just remember the effect it had on me psychologically, that they made such a huge deal that I failed one time. And you know, what are we going to do? And I remember thinking, well, I tried. Can we just not give me a pass and move on? If they're going to make a big deal about me trying really, really hard and failing, I'm not going to bother trying anymore. And that was pretty much the downhill of me not giving a crap about school anymore. That's when I gave up on school. It was about 7th grade, I think. And then about 8th grade, my middle school counselor, true story, my middle school counselor, when some of my friends for the first time convinced me to skip class, told me, when you're 16, you'll be able to drop out of school, and I recommend you do that. Because, in her words, school is not for everyone. Sounds terrible, right? But, in hindsight, she was absolutely right. School's not for everyone, and it definitely wasn't for me. Once I hit 7th grade, and especially 8th grade, all I cared about was the girls. Didn't care about any, the socializing aspect. Didn't care about any kind of academics in school whatsoever. Sure, drama was fun. I did some other singing clubs in high school, but or was that 8th grade? That was 8th grade. I was part of a group called Quicksilver. I had to audition and everything. I got like halfway through the first line of Happy Birthday, she said, you're in. I was the tenor. Very rapidly did I become a baritone a few years later. But anyway. But I was part of Quicksilver, and we did a couple of performances live, like in Elitchis and other places around town, around the state. And it was very choreographed. We had silver sequence vests. And after every single show, people would say, we couldn't really hear anyone very well, but we heard you just fine. because I was the only one enthusiastic about it. I was the only one giving it my all with the, when you feel pain or under a curse, you'll find his rain or prospects are worse. Like I barely went. Oh, we did Little Old Lady from Pasadena. Yeah. So I have a lovely singing voice. So I was part of Quicksilver. That was a good time. That was 8th grade. I believe it was 7th grade was when I saw UFOs. I had a UFO sighting encounter experience. True story. It went down just like this. I'll never forget it. I was at my house. It was later at night. I'd say 8, 9 o'clock. Let's say 9 o'clock. It was about 9 p.m. And I live near an Air Force base. Oh. But I looked out my backyard window, which is facing the mountains here in Colorado. And I looked up in the window and I saw like these flashing lights. And I was like, oh, what's that? And I looked a little closer and I'm like, well, that just doesn't look right. It doesn't look like a plane or anything. So I ran out to the backyard. It's funny, there's a song, I Want to See a Flying Saucer. And one of the things they say, I want to see a flying saucer. I want to see it land in front of my car or fly in formation over my backyard. Literally exactly what happened to me. So I go out to the backyard and I look up and sure enough, I see it was a circular motion. Not like a plane where you see blinking on one wing and blinking on the other wing. Because first of all, it was a circular motion of lights. And second of all, the lights were every single color of the rainbow. I'm talking red, blue, green, purple, yellow, red, blue, green, purple, yellow, pink, what have you. Going around in a circular motion. Not like really fast, but, pretty good. And then that's when I noticed, because it was going, pretty steady pace. And then that's when I noticed 2 more behind it. Exact same thing. In a triangle formation. And they were heading toward the Air Force Base. They weren't close enough for me to, see anything other than the lights themselves. But they definitely weren't high enough to be a plane. And I heard no sound whatsoever. So I saw UFOs. The next day, I go to middle school and I'm telling all my friends about this. Well, a couple of friends in particular. And another person who was kind of an acquaintance of ours, but this is how he became a closer friend. He was working on the cure for cancer. I wonder if I'll ever figure that out. Overheard, I wasn't even talking to him. He overheard what I was talking about. Came up to me, said, hey, right at the part where I said there was actually 3 of them. And he goes, were they in a triangle formation? And that's when it blew my mind. And I was like, this is legit for real. And I was like, yeah, they were in a triangle formation. How did you know that? So I do research on stuff like this. People have sightings like that all the time. They're very often in triangle formations. I've seen it I've read about it in books. Before the internet. And I was like, yeah. So I've experienced a sighting of a UFO. I believe it was I don't think it was a government experimental craft, because why 3 of them and why in the formation? I believe it was otherworldly beings, whether it be aliens, extra-dimensional beings, or the theory that I really find fascinating of it being us from the future. I remember at one party line party I had many years later telling this story, and someone said, aliens are us from the future. After World War III, nuclear bombs, we've mutated. That's why the skin's gray. The mouths are small because we only use pills and we don't really eat food anymore. That's why they have no teeth. Their heads are bigger because we got smarter. Our eyes are big and black and glazed over because of the atmosphere, yada, yada, yada. It was a great theory. Anywho, so I saw UFOs back in middle school. Let's see. And then my other teenage years, I guess, would be high school in the early 20s. I wouldn't know how to sum any of this up. I'm thinking of doing other separate videos about, relationships specifically, because all my high school stories are going to be about these hardcore relationships. My first girlfriend was in middle school. Her name was Chelsea. But again, I shouldn't go over these. I should have a separate relationship video, but they would still be 10-parter and take forever, because boy, do I have some stories. And then I dated a few people in high school. High school's where I met my wife, and it was one of those very cliche, she walked in the room and I went, mine, I'm going to marry that woman someday. It took a long time before we even dated, and I'm talking years. But I did marry her someday, and she still to this day, 23 years later, is my best friend. But high school was a very troubling time for me when I first got my heart broken. Because when I was young in my teenage years, I thought that all that mattered was relationships and finding someone to love and someone to love you and finding your soulmate and living happily ever after. And if you didn't have that, then life was meaningless and I was going to lose my mind, which is exactly what happened when I became a huge Korn fan. When I was in middle school, my teachers, because like I said, I gave up on my academics. I didn't do my homework. I was failing all my classes. I was supposed to repeat 8th grade, but what they did was decide, rather than hold me back, because they didn't want to deal with me again, I was very much the class clown, clearly, but rather than hold me back, they were going to send me to a special school. So instead of going to my normal school of Rampart, they decided to send me to a different school called Aspen Valley, that at the time didn't even have its own building and was sharing a wing at some tech government building called Digital. So my parents and we all agreed, okay, well, let's send them to the special school where they had smaller classes where they could pay more attention to the kids. It did no good, because literally the only reason I failed miserably in school was because I didn't want to do homework. I just didn't want to put in the work. I was too lazy, I was uninterested, and I was too busy socializing. So that's when I went to Aspen Valley instead. Made great friends. Great friends at Aspen Valley. I had a great time at Aspen Valley. Then they moved into their brand new building. Great memories at Aspen Valley. Oh, but then of course eventually when I stopped showing up to classes, after I was a certified mediator, they said, "Oh, man, we gotta expel you." And I was like, "Expel me?" And they said, "Okay, well, we're gonna make a deal. We're gonna kick you out, and we'll promise not to expel you." Meaning, if they expelled me, I wouldn't be able to go to any school in that district. They said, if you agree not to come back, whatever that means, agree not to come back to Aspen Valley and we won't expel you. We'll just bye-bye. So that way I was able to go to Rampart. We'll leave that here. We'll talk about Rampart in part 2. I told you, these were going to be way too long. How am I going to keep Rampart at 22 minutes? Plus the couple years after that. Boy, do I got stories. Good ones, too. Okie dokie.